Buddhism and Jainism share many things in common, including their origins in India, and a close geographical proximity to one another. In fact, it is not uncommon for Jainism to be referenced in Buddhist literature or stories. In addition to the things these two faiths share in common, there are also many differences that truly do make these two faiths distinct, a direct opposition to the belief that one originated as an offshoot of the other. The similarities and differences of these two systems are in areas such as doctrinal beliefs, depictions of the Buddha and Mahavira, the role of the householder as opposed to the ascetic life, and rules or regulations of the monastic life. First, both of these faiths arose in the same general geographic area, that is, India, which at the time may have included other small areas, later gaining status as their own independent countries. In addition, the founders of each faith, or more appropriately, the men who are credited with spreading Buddhism and Jainism, come from families of the same relative historical background. India, at this time in history, was broken into smaller kingdoms, each of which in turn had their own ruler. The Buddha, son of Suddhodana, ruler of the kingdom of the Sakyas, and Mahavira, son of Siddhartha, a chief of the warrior clan, were both members of the upper ruling class, princes if you will. Each is said to have left home and abandoned or renounced the material world at relatively the same young age, 29 in the case of the Buddha and 30 for Mahavira respectively. Each saw the suffering of the world, caused by things such as greed and an instinct or inclination to cling to these worldly material things. This in turn led both to leave the material world and instead to strive for an existence that did not require one to cling to these things or to the material world itself, and that through meditation one could ultimately be liberated from this world completely. There is also a debate about which of the two faiths arose first, and based on their geographical and doctrinal similarities, some propose one is an offshoot of the other. However, while some origins of Buddhism and Jainism may be shared, it has been noted in Buddhism that when the Buddha was founding his religion, Jainism was already flourishing. The similarities between Buddhism and Jainism go much further than just the origins of their founders. Over time, after the foundation of the faiths had been established, each faith found itself splitting into different sects, each of which had particular views on certain doctrinal beliefs, or whose followers were said to be closer in adherence to the tradition based on its founder. For example, who follows more closely the way of the Buddha. In Buddhism, the most recognized sects are those of Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Likewise, after its establishment, Jainism found itself divided into two major sects, that of the Digambara, sky-clad, and Svetambara, whose ascetics wear simple white robes. These sects are similar in their views and approaches toward women and liberation. For Theravadins, the order of religious nuns died out long ago, and Theravadins are not as liberal when dealing with women as are the Mahayanas. Those belonging to the Mahayana sect, on the other hand, accept women as nuns and believe they are able to achieve liberation and reach nirvana. Likewise, the Digambara sect of Jainism believes women are unable to be liberated, while the Svetambara sect allows women to be nuns and believe it is possible for women to be liberated, much like Mahayana Buddhism. From a doctrinal or belief standpoint, Buddhism and Jainism share many things in common as well. Neither possesses a belief in a creator god, who holds some sort of permanent supreme power. In this way, there is no god or gods who determine one's life, choices, faith, etc. No god is needed, only the self. One is his or her own savior. One can send praises to and revere minor deities found in each religion, as well as those who have led a moral life, such as saints. But ultimately, they cannot save you. You must want to achieve liberation and do it on your own, through your own actions. It may be for this reason that both religions appear generally tolerant of other belief systems. Jains, it is said, for example, may attend Hindu or Muslim celebrations without feeling that they are abandoning their own faith. Another major similarity is the prominence placed on ascetics or monks, as opposed to the lay community. In this way, those Buddhists and Jains who have renounced the world in order to meditate and achieve liberation, ending rebirth and suffering, are held in high regard, and are models for the lay community to aspire to. It is important, however, to give a little credit to both the lay Jain and Buddhist communities, as they are truly the lifeblood of these religions, in that without them, the ascetics would have no means for survival, such as food, clothing, funding for temples and monasteries, etc. One of the most comparisons between the two, which may shed some light on why many of the practices of both Buddhism and Jainism are similar, is that both formed as a sort of rebellion against the Vedic tradition prevalent at the time in India. Many of the issues that both Buddhism and Jainism had with the Vedic tradition are the same. One is the idea of the caste system set forth in Hinduism. The Buddha particularly disliked the notion that only people of a certain status could become liberated, and as a foundation of Buddhism, put forth the idea that anyone could become enlightened and reach nirvana, even women, and set up a religious ascetic order for them as well. A second important issue on which Buddhists and Jains agree, but differ from Hindus, is that of violence. Of all world religions, Buddhism and Jainism are two of, if not the two, most peaceful religions. At the core of both faiths is the ideal of ahimsa, or nonviolence. Vedic sacrifice, or sacrificing animals to please the gods, was something that was looked down upon by both Buddhists and Jains very strongly. As a result, in Jainism, much like Buddhism, there are specific job fields in which a good, practicing Buddhist or Jain would work, that is, a nonviolent one. These might include being some sort of businessman or businesswoman or a merchant who would deal a goods such as jewels. At all costs, one would avoid a career such as a butcher, in which a great deal of violence is done. As adherents of nonviolence, then, Jains are very strict vegetarians, going beyond meat and eating only what will not kill the plant from which the food itself comes. Fruits are a good example of this. Buddhists, however, are not required to be vegetarians, but many monks eat only meat that is given to them by another. They, in fact, did not kill it themselves. Buddhists and Jains, along with other groups who rejected the Vedas and Brahmanism, came to be known as Shramanas, or strivers, and put an emphasis on the renouncer. In addition to the ideal of nonviolence, the Buddhist thought of the Eightfold Path is indeed very similar to the idea of the three jewels in Jainism. In Jainism, the three jewels represent right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct or action. These three ideals do in fact call to mind much of the Eightfold Path. The first two Jain jewels, right faith and right knowledge, could correspond to the first Buddhist category on the Eightfold Path, that of wisdom, which includes proper view and proper intention. The third Jain jewel, right conduct or action, can also be found in the Eightfold Path, in the second category, that of morality, proper speech and proper action. Right or proper action would be very similar for both Buddhists and Jains. However, Buddhism and Jainism are also very distinct from one another. The biggest point of emphasis on the difference between the two lies in their understanding of the soul. From a Buddhist perspective, there is no soul. Rather, a person is just an accumulation of pieces in the universal scheme that came together and joined by chance. In this way, there is nothing permanent about the soul. Some would even say Buddhists are nihilistic. Human beings are plagued by suffering in this world because they seek to find something permanent to which they can grasp. Because there is nothing permanent, yet they seek it, humans suffer, die, and are reborn, only to continually repeat this vicious cycle. A Buddhist then sets off on the path to break this cycle, become awakened, and become liberated. Ideally, a Buddhist would seek to become a Buddha through meditation and adherence to the middle path,